Hello everybody, I'm back with another video for you today, and this time I'm going to be looking at the Pool 2 cards in Marvel Snap. I've looked at the previous cards that you get in the game, Pool 1 and the starting cards already, so if you want a tier list on those, then go check out my other videos. But for today, we're going to be looking at Pool 2, so that's level around 200 or so, 220, all the way up to around 500 collection level. So this is when the progress, the pace, I should say, of the unlocks has slowed down a little bit, but you're still getting some of these key cards that are sort of still an early game thing, and which will help you once you get into Pool 3, where all the big boys are playing with their powerful cards. So let's just jump right in. We've got Leech here first. 5 mana, 3 strength, and it removes the abilities of the cards in your opponent's hand. So it's kind of a tech card, a bit of a control tool to disrupt certain decks that want to play lots of ability-focused cards on the final turn, turn 6. So as a tech card in Pool 2, it's not very useful at all because very few decks will actually want to be doing things that Leech can disrupt. Leech becomes a lot better in Pool 3 when you're playing against things like Silver Surfer, for example, which wants to play a Serra and then dump a bunch of, cards which need to have their ability going off to be valuable. And Leech is a lot better when you have other powerful 6-drops that you can combine with it that you don't necessarily have access to in Pool 2. So as a card in Pool 2, I'd say Leech is not that great. I'll probably put it in C. You could theoretically play it. It might sometimes get value, but not going to be very good in Pool 2. Once you get out of Pool 2, though, it might be a card that you consider playing, and there are certainly some decks where he sees play and is very strong in. Okay, next we have Vulture. +5 strength when you move this card. Actually, I really like Vulture, and I think it's very strong. I was playing in Pool 3 even with Vulture, some sort of value-based deck with Storm, and you can use Iron Fist on him. I'm going to put Vulture in A tier. I think 8 points for 3 when combined with Iron Fist, for example, is really, really powerful. There's some other movement synergy there as well. Supports movement decks very well. So I think Vulture's an A tier card. I think you can actually get away with playing this not just in movement decks if you're so inclined, and it should be very strong. Okay, next we have Storm. Storm is a really nice card. So Storm lets you obviously flood a row and stop people from playing there in subsequent turns. You have one more turn to play in the flood before it is locked off for good. This card is great, definitely in a Pool 2. It's very, very strong. It's arguably even stronger once you get into Pool 3 and you have access to things like Cerebro decks, which can buff up the Storm lane, or possibly ongoing things. I guess you probably wouldn't Storm there, but there's always the option to, or just Zabu and dropping units in a Storm, or of course Silver Surfer. I mean, there's just so many ways you can use this card. I think it's one of the better 3-drops, if not the best, one of the best. So I'm going to put it in S tier. I think it's definitely a very worthy card of being S tier rated. Okay, next we have Killmonger. You destroy all of the 1-cost cards on the board. 3 mana, 3 strength. Now, this card is a powerhouse in Pool 2. If you're not respecting Killmonger, if you're not building your deck to keep Killmonger in mind, you're going to have a really tough time, I think, at this sort of a level. Zoo decks, if you're not playing all of your 1-cost cards at the end of the game, then Killmonger can just completely destroy you, and Zoo is pretty strong otherwise at that pool level. So I've got to put Killmonger in S tier. He also is still very strong as you get into Pool 3, and is just a card that really shapes the meta in many ways. Stops people from just running a bunch of 1-cost cards in their deck because you have the omnipresent threat of Killmonger to shut that down. Okay, Sandman. This is the next card. Sandman in Pool 2, pretty crap. If I were rating it for Pool 2, I'd say it's probably even an E card. I would never consider running this in Pool 2. You can consider running Sandman once you have some more cards like Psylocke to give you extra mana to ramp into it. You perhaps play a ramp deck, you play Doctor Doom, things like that. But in Pool 2, Sandman is no good at all. Okay, Hobgoblin is next. It's an okay card, Hobgoblin. You can obviously block a row. -8's pretty big, although you're not really getting exactly what you pay for with 5 mana. You'd hope for maybe 10 points or something like that. But you can disrupt what the opponent's doing. It's very good if you have Daredevil and things like that in Pool 3, or Galactus in Pool 5. Without those, I wouldn't say it's the best card ever. I'd probably put it in B tier. It's a little bit better than your average card, I suppose, in this pool. But you probably won't run it in a lot of decks, I would say. But yeah, a decent card, a decent card. Next we have Okoye. Okoye is pretty damn good, actually. She doesn't see a huge amount of play past Pool 2, but I think it's certainly a pretty strong one to just throw in any deck. If you do unlock her early in Pool 2, for example. Pretty damn good in Zoo as well, even later on. So I think I'll put Okoye in A tier. I think it's sort of the Scorpion that affects your own deck. There's some synergies with it. And yeah, I think it's a pretty good card overall. Next we have Swarm. Now Swarm without cards from the later pools is a bit underwhelming because you're just hoping it randomly gets targeted by a discard. I don't think it's a great card. I wouldn't play discard at this pool level either. I think it's kind of weak. Once you have Colleen, you can play Swarm, right? She discards the lowest unit from hand. And Swarm, of course, is going to be working and being copied and costing 0 mana when it is discarded. So yeah, Swarm in C tier I think is fair. Next we have Morbius. I think I'll put Morbius probably in C tier as well. Like I could even consider D. It's great in full-on discard decks, but again, in Pool 2 we don't really have access to those. Getting buffed every time you discard a card is useful a bit later on, or maybe if you have some, Battle Pass card or whatever coming up. There's a new Battle Pass card that will discard your whole hand, which could work quite well with Morbius. But yeah, overall, not great at this pool level. Could even be D tier, honestly. But I suppose I'll leave it C just to give you discard players, some hope. Okay, next we have Cloak. Cloak is a pretty good card. I wouldn't say it's good to run in every deck, and it definitely, it's good with Craven. That's sort of the main appeal, and of course you can use it with Vulture and just movement decks in general. I think it's a B tier card. It's fine. It's it fits in some decks. I wouldn't play it really though that often in Pool 2. I think there are some cards I'd rather play over Cloak. Okay, next we have Bucky Barnes. Bucky Barnes is a good card. Does kind of require you to play the Destroy package in order to get the value from it. You have to destroy him to then get the 6 strength Winter Soldier from this card. So Bucky Barnes is okay. It's a good value card, particularly if you play it with Carnage. For example, you play 2/2 and you can get a total of 10 points on the board. That's pretty strong. But, I think the synergy required means that I'll put it in B tier, again with Cloak. They're good cards if you're building for them. Otherwise, they're not that great and you won't run them really ever. Okay, next we have Jubilee. Jubilee is very strong, I think, for Pool 2. It lets you do some things that you shouldn't really be able to do. You can cheat out some very strong units. I wouldn't say you'd always want to play Jubilee, and she can be a bit random, a bit RNG heavy, even in decks which build for her. But, there are lockjaw decks which will use her to randomly pull out very, very strong units later in the game. She, of course, plays a random unit from your deck when you play her. And she has some benefit with some locations as well. So I'll put Jubilee in A tier. I think that's pretty fair. I wouldn't always run it, but it's a good card in this pool for sure. Next we have the Collector. The Collector's an okay card for dinosaur decks, Devil Dinosaur decks at this level, although it definitely will become outclassed a bit later on in the pools, and I think Collector generally is not very popular beyond Pool 2. In Pool 2 it's okay, I'll put it in B tier. You can play it in a dino deck and you get some value whenever you get a card that's from outside of your deck. Of course he gets buffed. Rhino. Now this card is pretty crap, to be honest. I've seen this played in Silver Surfer occasionally, but it's just like a very bad Scarlet Witch probably most of the time. I would never really run Rhino. It's probably an E tier card. Not a fan of that one. Pretty bad for this pool level. Next we have Sabretooth. Same story here. It goes to 0 mana if you destroy it, but it's just so pointless. 3 mana for a 4-drop. Bleh, terrible. The one consideration for Sabretooth is, of course, Galactus decks. They might want to play that, but also if you even play Sabretooth in those, it's a bit of a giveaway that you're playing a Galactus deck. So I don't even know if I like it in Galactus. So yeah, pretty crap card overall. Wouldn't really play that ever. Next we have Vision. Vision is able to move on turn 6. You can move him and just get that 7 points wherever you need it. Quite a powerful ability and will be played sometimes in Pool 3 with things like Shuri, or even later than Pool 3. But at this pool level, it's a good card, don't get me wrong, it's a good card, particularly paired with things like Storm. I don't think it's like super broken. I'd probably put it A tier. I think it could be deserving of S at this pool level. It maybe could be, but it's on the borderline. So I'll put it in A, I think, to keep the S tier a little bit more elite. Okay, next we have Infernaut. Now, Infernaut's really quite strong at this pool level. Of course, you can't play it if you've played a card the turn prior, but typically you want to use it with Sunspot here, skip turn 5, and then drop the Infernaut. Now, I think this is one of the most powerful plays you can do at this pool level. It's just very hard to deal with the Sunspot if you armor it to protect it from Killmonger, and you just drop that 20 points. Not a lot of decks can keep up with 20 points, so Infinite's a strong contender for an S tier card at this level. You can also play it with Jubilee to get some insane value. It's a contender for S. I think I'll put it A though. Again, you're not always going to want to run it. You do have to build your deck completely around it. But it's a pretty good card. I would say at this level it's a pretty damn good card. Later on, you're going to want to run Infinite in a lot of different decks because getting that 20-point body cheated out in some way with discard or some other mechanic is very, very, very strong. Okay, next we have Warpath. This is a pretty strong ongoing card. You are forced to play in 2 rows if you want the +4 strength for him, moving him up to 9 strength, which is pretty decent. Warpath, I think it's a pretty good card. I might put it in B tier though. I'd say your deck has to be built around it quite heavily. It can work in some decks, but it also is quite exploitable if your opponent kind of knows what they're doing and has a good can play in all 3 rows, all 3 locations. So yeah, I think B tier is fair. Next we have Sunspot. Oops. Very, very good card, 1-drop. Played in a lot of decks because it allows you to use up all of your mana, getting boosted whenever you don't spend energy. So yeah, very, very strong, works with Infinite, works in all kinds of decks. Control, you can even play it with Killmonger if you put armor in your deck as well. So I think Sunspot's really, really good. I'll put it S tier. I think this card is a real standout and just enables so much and gives you so much value in a lot of games. So I'll put S tier Sunspot. I think that's reasonable. Next we have Scorpion. This is going to be another S tier card. Afflicting all of your opponent's cards with -1 strength is a very powerful effect. It messes up entire strategies in some way, like Cerebro, for example, where you want to align your strengths. Scorpion just pisses them off. Yeah, it's just a very good card, a staple in a lot of decks as your turn 2 drop that you want to get a lot of value from and, yeah, disrupt what the opponent's doing. So Scorpion S tier. Next we've got Nakia. Now Nakia is actually 2 strength now at the time of recording this video instead of 3, which I think makes her a bit better. I still think it's like a C tier card. I wouldn't really run Nakia, even at 6 strength if you get that double reveal off. But of course, you're going to rely on some synergy, I think, to get the real Nakia value. It's not a horrible card. It could even be B tier with the recent buff, but I'll put it in C, I think. You can definitely do some combos with it, though. Maybe some Moon Girl stuff, or like you can do stuff later on in Pool 3 and whatnot, or you can, maybe play this with multiple man or something in movement. I mean, I think it's an okay-ish card. I think C is probably fair, though. Okay. D tier is rather empty. I'm gonna, you know what? I'll move these guys down to D. I think that's reasonable. I wouldn't really, yeah, I think that's fair. We've got too many cards taking up the C. Yeah, maybe I'll even put, nah, it's fine, it's fine. We don't have to have a lot in all of the sections. Okay, Agent 13, good card, A tier, works very well in Dino deck. Nothing really more to say there, get a random card. It's a good 1-drop, it's a fine 1-drop. Nothing more really to talk about. Shang-Chi is a really good card. It's got to be an S tier. I think it's my favorite tech card in the game. It's like a Geralt Igni in a way from Gwent. You can destroy all of your opponent's highest strength units, or rather, that's Igni's effect. Shang-Chi is destroying all of the units with 9 strength or more that the opponent has. Really powerful, able to destroy those crazy Shuri decks or whatever the opponent wants to do, even later on in pools. And I think it could be arguably a bit weaker than S tier at this pool level because you don't face a huge amount of cards that have such high strength. And in fact, you know what? I might put it in A actually because at this pool level, it is kind of hard to get Shang-Chi value sometimes. Later on though, Shang-Chi is super, super good. Like really, really good tech card. Quite unexpected, fits in a lot of decks. Shang-Chi could go S, but let's be reasonable and put it A here. So we've got Iceman, Ebony Maw. Iceman first, this is an S tier 1-drop. Sees play everywhere, just disrupting your opponent, giving them +1 mana on a card in their hand. Very, very useful. You can play it in control decks. You can play it in zoo decks. It's a great card. Yeah, no complaints for Iceman. And Ebony Maw, the final one here, a bit more situational. Of course, if you play it, you can only play it on turn 1, 2, or 3, and it will stop you playing cards in the location that you play it. So a bit of a downside comes with it. A bit of a better card when you get some later game stuff, some pool 3 unlocks, for example. But I think Ebony Moore's okay. It's a good card. Could even be A tier, but I'll put it in the B tier here, I think. And I think that wraps up my tier list. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with how that looks. Let me know what you think about these cards, where they should go. Do you disagree with some of my picks? Bearing in mind this is for Pool 2 specifically, and without considering synergies that you unlock in later pools. With those synergies, it would be a different story. Sandman would be a lot higher, Leech would be a lot higher, etc. So yeah, let me know what you think. Do subscribe as always if you'd like to see more content from me. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.